Hello, third graders. I hope that you're all having a terrific Tuesday and you're ready for Chapter 5 of Rump. So far, we've met quite a few characters, right? We've met Red, Rump, Rump's Grant, and then last chapter, we met Red's grandma as well. So a couple character traits that we came up with for Red's grandma were wise, outspoken, and someone in my class said that she was a little bit creepy. She just kind of popped up out of nowhere. And I said, okay, yeah, I can see that. That might be a little bit scary. And then another one was kind of mysterious, right? She gave she gave Rump she said all these things to Rump that kind of made you wonder, what does she mean? Because she didn't really explain what she meant. Okay, so here we go with Chapter 5 of Rump. Chapter 5, Fluff to Mouse, Mouse to Mice. The next rations day, Red and I walked home together from the mill. We hugged our ration sack to us, the promise of fresh bread inside them. I wanted to ask Red more about her granny and the things she had said to me, but I didn't dare, not with the way she reacted when I said her granny was strange. Sometimes little things could make Red steaming mad. I just couldn't tell what those little things might be. That's the danger with Red. Unpredictable. So scholars, have you ever heard of the term seeing red? It's an idiom and it means that you're really mad. Like if you're really mad, you're seeing red. You're not actually seeing red, but it's an idiom, so it means that you're really mad. So I think that this author is using Red's name to introduce that idiom. Interesting. Suddenly, Red groaned, and I looked up to see a tall, skinny man leaning against a tree, a giant sack flung over his shoulders. "Kessler the peddler!" I shouted. The man turned toward me, flipped his hat off his head, and bowed. His bright orange hair stuck out in every direction. Kessler was the only person we ever saw from the kingdom besides the tax collector. He came to the mountain to sell goods from the kingdom. Colorful threads, clay pots, and wooden spoons. Sometimes he had gold, likely from our mines, molded into rings and bracelets and chains. How funny that we dug up all that gold, but we could never afford to buy it back. But I wasn't interested in gold, and the thing I wanted to see from Kessler wasn't in his old patched-up sack. "Children," chimed Kessler. He looked around to see if we were alone, then whispered, "Come for a spell? An enchantment?" "Magic?" I stepped forward, but Red grabbed my shirt collar and hauled me back. "Of course not," spat Red. "Speak for yourself." I shook her off. I had heard Frederick and Bruno talk of Kessler's magic. Nothing like a witch turning someone into a toad or making a storm, but he could touch fire, make things disappear, or turn one small thing into another. That's what I wanted most, to see him turn one thing into something else. Scholars, do you think that that's real magic, or maybe he's an illusionist, kind of like the magicians that we have now? So let's read what he can do. It says he could touch fire, make things disappear, or turn one small thing into another. That sounds like a lot of magic tricks that I've heard. But let's keep reading. Let's see if Kessler's the real deal. That's what I wanted most, to see him turn one thing into something else. "Only cost you a scoop of grain," said Kessler. I hesitated. Gran would be furious if she'd known I'd traded even a tiny amount of our food for a magic trick. We had so little to begin with. Besides, she didn't approve of magic. I shook my head and stepped back. "Oh, come on, just one scoop. You won't starve for it. Bet you haven't had much fun in weeks, all that digging." Kessler gave a feeble smile. Suddenly saw the hunger in his eyes, how hollow and sharp his cheeks were. He must be even hungrier than I was to sell a magic trick for a scoop of grain. Was I that hungry to see magic? "Can you turn one thing into another?" Of course, of course." He waved me to come closer. "Don't Rump." I turned to see Red standing with her arms folded around her rations, glaring at Kessler. Kessler frowned. "There's no harm in it." Says who? Asked Red. She suddenly looked very motherly. Last time you came, you set Gus's hair on fire. Well, that was a bit of a... And remember Helga and her wart? Purely coincidence, said Kessler, cutting her off with a nervous laugh. He reached into his pockets. Look, see? No fire, no warts. I will simply turn this bit of fuzz into a mouse! A mouse! He waved a tuft of lint in front of my face. Could he really turn it into a mouse? Grant told me a story of turning mice into horses and a pumpkin into a golden coach. That reminds me of a fairy tale. Put what fairy tale you think he's talking about in the comments below. It says, Grant told me a story of turning mice into horses and a pumpkin into a golden coach. I think we know that one. Wouldn't it be fun to see a bit of fuzz turn into a live mouse? Rump, said Red through gritted teeth. No. I ignored her. It was just a scoop of grain. Gran would hardly notice, and I'd skip breakfast in the morning. That was fair. I opened my ration sack, and Kessler whipped a tin cup from his pocket. He quickly scooped out a heap of flour and then pocketed it again. My stomach clenched. I had to skip 3 breakfasts for that. Red clucked her tongue in disappointment. And now, said Kessler, holding out the piece of lint, I shall turn this fuzz into a mouse. Kessler cupped the fuzz in both hands and brought it closer to his face. He muttered some words and his eyes got big and glassy. The fuzz started to tremble and swell. A tail poked out of one end, and the other end grew ears and a pointy tail, a little snout, and made a little squeak. Last to take shape were 4 small paws and 2 beady black eyes. A mouse! He had turned the fuzz into a mouse. Did you see? I said to Red, pointing to the mouse. I saw, she said grumpily. I smiled up at Kessler. He smiled back and put the mouse in his vest pocket. Next time, maybe I'll turn the mouse into a cat. Eep, eep. We looked down to see another mouse scurrying towards us. Then another, and another. Eep, eep, eep. 6 mice were skittering over Kessler's feet. Well, look at that. He pulled the mouse out of his pocket. They'd come to greet their new friend. Isn't that magical? I started to nod in agreement, but then I heard strange noises. A pattern like rain, and also a distant squeaking, like a flock of birds taking flight. The sound got louder. Here it comes, said Red. Kessler's eyes went wide. He held the mouse up and stared at it. Oh my, oh. Then came a sudden explosion. An explosion of mice. Hundreds of mice poured from trees and holes in the ground. Through windows and under door cracks, screams and shouts echoed throughout the mountain. Something crashed in a nearby cottage, and a man threw open the door and fled with a dozen mice squeaking at his heels. The mice converged and ran toward us. I scrambled up a nearby tree and wrapped my legs around it. Time to go! Kessler hitched up his pants, flung his sack over his shoulder, and ran, the mice trailing in his wake. Red laughed and shook her head. That fool! He still hasn't learned to stay away from magic. He'd be safer playing with fire. Okay, so scholars, this also reminds me of another fairy tale. All of the mice came out and they followed Kessler away out of the town. Write in the comments below if you know what fairy tale that is or what fable that is. Also, I think that was real magic that Kessler did. It wasn't just an illusion, but I don't think he did it right. Let's keep reading. That fool, he still hasn't learned to stay away from magic. He'd be safer playing with fire. But Kessler only does small tricks. What's wrong with that? All magic has consequences, Rump. Even small magic can have big consequences. If he had turned it into a squirrel, would all the squirrels have attacked? Something entirely different could have happened. Something even worse. Like maybe he could have grown squirrel teeth. Red stuck out her teeth and wiggled her nose. I laughed. Red dropped her squirrel face, so she looked grave and grim. For your food, Kessler takes the risk, but one day it will catch up to him. He might not even get to eat that food before the mice do. I felt annoyed. What made her think she knew everything about magic? Well, I thought it was brilliant. I should have paid him more. He got rid of all the mice in the village. Red stared at me and shook her head and walked away. If I could, I would do magic. I would change lots of things for good, like make myself grow or turn fuzz into food. I'd put more gold into the mountain. That bit of magic made me hungry for more. More magic, more transformation, and not from Kessler. I wanted magic all my own. How bad could the consequences be? So that is the end of chapter 5. It leaves us on a bit of a cliffhanger. And I don't think that that's the last time that we're going to see magic in this fairy tale Rump. So I will let you go for today, and tomorrow we'll read chapter 6, Gold, Gold, Gold. Have an awesome Tuesday, scholars, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.